just you get to choose. Right? Like here's the scenario. The environment gives us something which can be perceived as negative, can be perceived as not working, can be perceived as problematic. The world's ending. But we get to choose to see it like that, or we get to choose to see it as an opportunity.
So clearly that it's my responsibility now to do that for other people. If I have information and, other people's success is my success and vice versa.
Because you know what? Like, the challenges or the roadblocks are the journey themselves.
There's no big things. It's all little things compounding on top of each other. We welcome Lisa Anna Palmer to Truthseekers. Lisa is the founder and CEO of Light Your Leadership Inc. At Light Your Leadership Inc., she and her team help leaders to realize their vision by learning to put people and planet first and to operate with excellence in a post-pandemic world. They help you connect at the human level through compassion, courage, and competence so that you can learn to love your life as a leader. She is also a leadership and career advancement coach and mentor, trainer, keynote speaker, podcast host, facilitator, and best-selling author. We welcome Lisa. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. So great to be here.
Absolutely. I'm just reminded of our pre-show connection. There's so many high-level topics that I can't wait to jump into. I know we had some I guess buzzwords is what you would call them, but leadership for one, and maybe just talk a little bit about the rap sheet here, if you will, is so long with what you do and the difference that you make. I'm wondering which of those things gives you, what pops into mind first that gives you the most juice? Like what gets you most excited right now with what you're up to?
What gets me most excited is we're really at a crossroads right now. And although it's been hugely challenging, people are struggling, some are suffering in workplaces. I see that there's a huge opportunity to do things much, much better. And it gives me hope to have important conversations and dialogues with people like you, Josh, and Nick, and others who can actually see this vision for a better future. And that really lights me up because I think that the last 3 years have really helped to crystallize what are some of the things that are most important in workplaces and society as a whole, which is that human connection piece. And while there are forces trying to maybe go back to some of the workplace practices that weren't as humane, so to speak, I think that the time has come for us to have these conversations and to ignite people with them.
And is there hopes of what we'll get out of the conversation? When we speak of human connection, like what about that? What do we hope to get to when we, with leaders watching this or business owners who might watch this?
Yeah. And I think it's, let's go back to the basics. I think we overcomplicate things sometimes and want to have huge initiatives, whereas really, I have a quote in the book and it says, it costs 0 cents to be a decent human being. And I think we need to remember more than learn sometimes of what that means, right? And if people can have the insight of remembering for themselves first, right? Remember how you feel when you're treated in a certain way, be it good or bad in the workplace, like what motivates you. And that's one of the things that I like to engage leaders in when they're trying to figure out, well, how do I connect with these employees? Like how, what is it? What's the magic sauce? It's like, well, remember for yourself, like, what are some of the things, when you got performance feedback, when did it work well? When didn't it work well? And just do that self-reflection. So it's a lot around self-awareness and that sometimes we overcomplicate things. We try to create buzzwords. And it really comes back to basics. Let's just be decent human beings to one another and figure out how to unleash that potential and how to get back to excellence,
Of that. I'd love to get Coach Nick's thoughts on this because we talk a lot about how fast information is speeding up. Mm-hmm. I won't get it right. Maybe Coach Nick can help me out with this, but like every 24 hours, like at a certain point, it's going to double or something like that, something crazy. So the input is just like enormous. And to your point, back to basics, like that really resonates with me because we're obsessed with the newest thing and the latest this and how do we do that? And it's like, well, we're not doing the simple things right anymore. We're getting away from what got us here.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I think it's a big context of why coaching is so powerful, because we're often just every single week working with our clients, just bring it back to the basics.
Hmm.
And I often think about, like, when it comes to fighting, when it comes to boxing or martial arts, doesn't matter if you just won a championship and you go back to the gym after having some couple of days off, you're still going to be there doing jab crosses like you would do the first day, because those basics are so important, because that's the foundation that everything else is built of. There's no point trying to do fancy spinning techniques and such if you can't throw a standard jab cross. And same thing for leadership. I think it's really true. Me and Coach Josh just got back from one of our favorite clients and our team last week, and there's so much of that stuff there. Let's just get clear. What's most important? Are we having real conversations? And I think what you just said, Lisa, really resonated with me around the self-awareness and learning through the experiences you've already had, which is crazy to think about, but that's what we need, because we forget real quick.
Right.
What is it that we would have liked in that position? What have we needed in that position? And
Right.
creating a way we can actually communicate, because it's so easy to assume and expect, and without being able to really be clear, because most people are talking about things that they think that they believe when they're sharing with you. And it's not like they're trying to mislead you, but they're just misleading themselves, because they're on some level not being dirt honest with themselves. And I
Mm.
think that's a big part of leadership, is pushing people to that point, not for you to be dirt honest with them, but for you to help them be dirt honest with themselves. Does that resonate for you, Lisa?
Exactly. Yeah, no, definitely. And it's about peeling back the layers, right? I think there's so much programming that we've been exposed to in organizations. Like, for example, I know a lot of people with high leadership potential who are really great at what they do. They may be subject matter experts, and they also have the ability to be good leaders because they know how to connect with people and engage them, etc. And we hire people on the basis that, oh, they're great team players, they're decent, they have integrity, all these things, good to work with. And then when they're ready for promotion or they're looking ahead, they're told, well, you need to play the game to get ahead, you need to be mean to get ahead. I don't know if you've ever experienced that yourself, but I right. uh, right. So here we are, we're hiring people because they're great human beings, and once they start performing, then the message is, okay, forget all that. In order to get like the plum rolls, to get ahead, to get promoted, you need to be mean. It happened to me 3 times in my career, and I was at a loss for words. I'm like, what do you mean? All of a sudden. Right. So I think that let let's like, can we like erase those kinds of programming that tell us that we need to be anyone other than ourselves? And most people really truly, at the core of it, if you take away those kinds of programmings, if you take away beliefs about being uber professional robotic people in order to be leaders and not to be able to connect, if you take all that away, most people are really decent human beings. So let's remember that, and let's go back to that, and let's promote people based on the fact that they can be really great, authentic, know how to motivate others by being kind to them, by listening to them, validating them. And yeah, sometimes we need to have difficult conversations. Let's do that in a compassionate way that maintains the dignity of the other person, right?
Yeah, I love that. That word compassion always sticks out to me, because there's been plenty of times in my previous career before coaching, working in the corporate world, where people would have a higher standard for delivery,
Mm-hmm.
but not a high standard for compassion. And that for me is like, you can't have one without the other. Because if you're at the edge, you're more likely to fall off it, and hurt yourself. So you also got to have a high standard for compassion. And if as a leader you're asking people to come up to the standard for delivery, and there's no high standard for compassion, like, even if I win, I lose, because I'm going to fall down at some point along the way, and someone's going to hit me in the head, back of the head for it, and it's not going to be like, I don't want to play that game, let me out. Like, and
Yeah,
so I think that's so important to have together.
right. And we can't do our best work when being hit in the back of the head. Like, I don't know. And
Yeah, I definitely can't.
right. And so I think that having those ideas, and when we're looking at some of the statistics, right, and this kind of is in a bit of a side uh, note notice. So what's happening now is that 70% of people are saying no to promotions. So that's telling, right? Why are people staying away from leadership roles? And we need leaders, right? We ever need leaders? And so I'm thinking about this. I'm hearing a lot about the great resignation. I'm like, this is the great abdication. And we need to ask
Mm.
ourselves, why is this happening? Right? Why is it happening? And I think it's because, this is my theory, let me know what you think, is
Mm-hmm.
that we're expecting people with high potential for leading and who are doing well and are high performers to be someone other than themselves, take on leadership roles, and not necessarily in a good way. And now people are starting to resist that more and more because of the clarity we've got in the last 3 years. And they're saying, you know what, I don't have time for, trying to learn how to be nasty all of a sudden. This has worked for me all along, to do well, to care about my work, care about my colleagues. And people are opting out. And so what
Mm.
happened, right? What do you think? I don't know. What?
It's, it really resonates back to what you were just saying as well. I think about up to a certain level, and then it's like, oh no, you got to completely change who you are to get to the next place. Okay, and it's funny because I'm putting together a new talk at the moment, which is really around moving from management to leadership, and the focus there is emerging leaders to think about, look, they've been successful in their process role or their SME, like you mentioned earlier, and they've given people. It's like, oh, here you go, you good at that task, that process, go have some people, and then they apply the same standards or approach that they've done to be successful in that process to people, but people are not processes. And I think that's the next level that you're talking to. Is not that perhaps the support that they get is not how to be a leader, it's how to do the process and now be mean as well, right? You just need to be a bit more aggressive. Like, or you need to be do all the things you were doing it for, now just be more assertive, right? And like, oh, okay, that's good.
Right, right. Learn how to push people around, because that's how you get things done. Wrong. That's how you burn people out. That's how maybe you'll get things done this week, but in the long term, you're gonna have people leaving. You're gonna have people burning out. The quality. I was looking at I was thinking about excellence the other day. I was like, where's our standard of excellence going? I mean, we here in my city. So I live in Ottawa, Canada, been trying to build a light rail train forever. I mean, and there's trains all over the world. It's like, and it's so hard to get things right. Like, things are not working properly. Like, so I'm thinking, okay, so what could be affecting that? And I think a big part of that is that leadership gap. As leaders, we need to learn how to help others unleash their potential, how to grow as leaders, how to take responsibility, how to take pride in their work. There's nothing more powerful than being proud of the work that you do, right? So, and to go back to those kinds of things, yes, all those other types of initiative, from lean to agile to AdCart, to all those things are important. Yes, process improvement is important. I've done reengineering myself, business process reengineering, all that stuff, all important. However, if you don't have that solid foundation at the basis of being able to connect at the human level through compassion, having the courage and having the competence, then it's like a house of cards. It all falls apart.
I mean, we're going through this with Pro Advisor Coach right now, our own coaching company. We're working on the foundation parts to make sure that that's right, so we can build it up the way that
Right.
we know we're capable of. And that's what it's all about is, first of all, we're getting feedback from people about what it feels like to go through our process. And we're taking that information to pay attention to it, first of all, to pay homage to it and listen to it. And then what do we do with it? So that's what we're talking about in our company here, because everything is about people first, right? That's
Yeah.
what we're talking about here is making, feeling connected with each other. And I think especially true of leadership, you get into that position, some of that connection goes away because you're, maybe self-projection, but you're on a pedestal. It feels like you have to be a different person. Like, that's the belief system. Well, I have to become somebody new because now people are counting on me. And that, I think what we're saying is that that's not necessarily true. If anything, become more of yourself, another version of yourself, and not by being mean or becoming somebody that you're not, or is not in congruence with who you are, but maybe shedding some of your own belief systems and some of the own limitations that you have, because we're all much more capable than we usually give ourselves credit for. I think it's a lot of that support system around, you know, a lot of these new leaders are experiencing leadership for the first time, so they don't know what to do until we get the repetitions there. We can't be really really good at it, quote unquote. So I think about that a lot with as we grow. Um, and get put into these new positions, to Coach Nick's point, with like we're good at something now, here's a bunch of people to manage. It's a totally different skill set, but it's not at the same time. It's a version that we haven't tapped into of ourselves quite yet, and I think that's what this is all about. That's what these conversations are all about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to go to the process improvement stuff you talked about, Lisa, or like, oh, is it Azure, or is it Waterfall? And like, because it's tangible, people can see it, and people don't. And it literally has a bad name because people talk about the soft skills. That's a bad name.
Right.
It's not. It's not. It's
So the
badly
hardest
named.
skills. They're the tough skills. There you go.
Right, right. It's like, oh, it's soft. It's like, oh, it's not really. It's not. That's not what it's about. It's like, oh, those are. Worry about those later. It's like,
Like,
no, that's everything. That's the foundation. That's what it really is all about. And like, I always think about it. You talked about abdication from leadership. You know, I think about my previous world. It wasn't really an abdication, but I certainly saw it as a game and not necessarily something that I was really cared about. And like I was pretty good at the game, but I learned a lot. But now where I am in leadership is it, Coach Josh, your point. That's how I feel. I just show up and I just be myself. Right? You know, one of the beliefs I have when it comes to coaching or it comes to leadership stuff within the team is that whatever I say in the moment is the right thing, because that's the only useful belief to have. What else is? I mean, whatever comes out is the right thing. And it doesn't mean that there's not a back end of process improvement and continuous improvement and everything else, but
right.
just know that whatever comes out is you authentically in that moment, and that can't be wrong, right? Because that's just it can't be compared. It's just who you are.
Yeah, no, I love both what the two of you are saying about, bringing it back to that humanity, because like I said, all those other approaches, initiatives are very important. However, we need that foundation piece. And that foundation piece is about people truly tapping into their own truth about leadership, who they are as a person. And then to help others do that as well. Because when people feel authentic, they don't feel like they have to hide or mask anything. And that's when you unleash their potential, right? Their gifts. If their gifts are hiding behind masks, behind layers of programming that are not useful, then those gifts stay hidden. If you want to unleash that, you help people to be authentic in the workplace, and then also care about them as a person. It's more holistic, right? When we feel seen, heard, valued, then we can get through anything. I often say, let's pull together to pull through. Let's stop pretending we're anything other than human beings. And, like the algorithms and the AIs are busy multiplying themselves and multiplying information. Let's do what we're really good at, right? Which is let's focus on our strengths. Let's leverage them, and,
Yeah.
and there's nothing more beautiful than when we're leading and we could see a person's face light up, because they've had some sort of realization, or even as coaches, right? They light up and there's like a transformation that happens. And that's when they connect with their truth and they're being really themselves. And I think if we can demonstrate that and use that for role modeling with leaders, and if leaders, I believe leaders have the capacity to do that. Maybe they've never been shown how or what that looks like or paid attention to. That's where that awareness piece, it's like, look at your employees. Like when you talk to them and they light up, what does that feel like? And if we start thinking about leadership, even beyond skills, it's a way of being. And I often talk about it as it's an energy that wants to do good. So how do we unleash that energy that wants to do good in others and in ourselves first, right? And yeah.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Coach Josh, what was your experience of that last week in our on-site I mentioned, with the leader you had down there, and just observing her stepping up and seeing like how instinctive her leadership skills actually were when she was like letting the governor off and like just being true to herself.
Yeah, like Lisa's saying, her gifts were like locked under, like we had to remove some of the barriers so that she could be her authentic self. And it was just a prompt to get her into that state, but it was tell me a time where you felt unstoppable, where you felt on top of the world. And it was immediate. Like she lit up and just walked through a 60-second explanation of this time where she felt like that. And then all of a sudden she showed up to what she had to do that, might have been a bit confrontational for her, was out of her comfort zone, and just knocked it out of the park. It was like so authentic, and was challenged too. Like it wasn't easy. It was something that she had to bring back and keep at a little bit more than she probably would have wanted had we not done that exercise. But showed up, and then what was the result? To Lisa's point, got more out of her employee, and there was a connection that was made, and a real bonding. Regardless of what the content was about, it was more about the connection piece to build that relationship so that they can address issues as they come up down the road in a more effective manner.
Yeah, yeah, that's a beautiful story, uh, and I think there's so much potential for us to love our life as a leader, because when those I call those sacred moments, when you see that person light up in front of you and there's that connection, it's like magical. And I just wanted to share, I had a client who was struggling a bit with um, being able to engage her staff, a new executive director, fairly new, and again, very specialized in her field. And she was trying all kinds of things with her employees that she had read about or learned about or whatnot. I'm like, okay, well, that's great that you know all that. Now let's pull back those layers. Now, like, what do you think? What do you want to see? And what are some of your beliefs that you have that are not serving you? Like, she thought that because she was a leader and she was the top of the organization, that she had to figure everything out herself and then instruct others to do what was needed. I said, well, let's do a little experiment. I said, the next meeting, why not have them contribute ideas, right? So we went through a whole process, and then sure enough, when we met the next time, I said, so how did it go? Well, she says, I can't believe it. She was in a position, had she just not engaged her employees, she would have cut a program because the budget cuts had come down the pipe. So I turned it over to my team, she said, and I asked them to come up with ideas. And she says, wouldn't you know, they were able to find ways that we can continue the program within budget. And she was like amazed. I said, well, isn't that fantastic? She goes, yes. It's like she was amazed. And so it's these sacred moments where we have realizations and we remember the power that we have, but also the power that people on our teams have to do amazing things, and how to unleash that and be able to connect with that is amazing.
Hmm. Lisa, can you start to talk about how you interweave this into your work? And I know that you've written a book, right? And like I want to hear more about that and how this applies to what you're passionate about.
Well, I don't know if it shows, but I'm passionate about leadership. So uh, I don't know if it shows.
Not at all.
I'm passionate about and the type of leadership where we know how to help others to connect with their own truth and to be able to connect with their passions and bring that into the workplace. So a few years ago, I had the idea to write a book. It was actually while I was going through my passion test certification, because I became a passion test facilitator, which is basically, it sounds like a test, but it's not. It's to help you get clear on what are your top 5 passions at any point in life, and to make decisions, be guided, so that you can stay in alignment and have greater enjoyment and fulfillment. So as I was doing that, it came to me that I wanted to write a book. It surprised me, really. I was like, I was not expecting that. And it was about leadership. And the reason leadership is so important to me is that I burnt out 3 times by the time I was 38, like really bad burnouts, like physical burnouts, where, I had to get taken by ambulance to the hospital twice. Once because I had like the worst cluster headache. I couldn't even stand up. And the second time, my stomach turned into a bag of rocks. That's what it felt like. And I couldn't eat or drink for 2 weeks. So
Wow.
yeah. And having spent my entire career up to that point, like now I've been at it for 30 years, but I'd been working in corporate. So I started working in a big 6 firm. So the first time I burnt out, I was about 28 years old, because and I, at the time, I was kind of blaming the organization. With in hindsight now, I see it's like it's too it's it's a dance. It's both the organization, us as self leaders, right? But of course, at 28, I didn't have that insight. So then I changed employers. I went to work for a federal employer, and then again there, I didn't quite have a massive burnout there. I was only there for 2 years, but then I went to a third one. And I was always working in HR roles and always advising senior management, directors, vice presidents, managers, and also counseling employees. So I had the kinds of roles, and I loved that work. But there came a time that, so I was in my early 30s, and I'd been asked to do an acting position as an HR director. And the thing is that I didn't know how to say no or set boundaries. So like literally my office was like, the the HR dump where everybody would come dump difficult files. And right? I was doing 3 jobs. I was literally doing 3 jobs. One, a person was off sick and all that, and I was replacing. And if it was now, I'd be like, hey, hold on a second, right? But at 33, I didn't have that insight. So until I got coached, actually. So
there you go. Yeah, absolutely. That's so often the thing that I hear.
Yeah, and then the third time was because I was a hard worker, doing everything right, and then I was being bullied by somebody who had been hired externally. So when I started my own company in 2011, I was like, I'm HR consultant. Okay. So that's pretty broad, So then I started getting requests for all kinds of things, conflict management, harassment reports, all these things. I'm like, no, that's not the kind of work I want to do. I really thought about it. I'm like, okay, right? I really thought about it. And I was like, what impact do I want to have? And it boiled down to leadership, both self-leadership, the ability to make sure that I'm setting myself up for success and health in the workplace, and to do my very best and be excellent at what I do, as well as formal leadership of others. So that's where, I started thinking and getting ideas. And then one morning, actually, you're going to laugh. This is funny. I woke up one morning with the idea of a children's book, and is like, where did all the great leaders go? And anyway, so it was a book about, let's say, a 12-year-old who was doing a school project, going to interview leaders to find out, well, how do you engage employees? How do you motivate employees? Because, that's what 12-year-olds want to know. But anyways, that's what I thought. It was interesting. So, but as it goes on, as this young man goes on and starts interviewing all these leaders, gets to the end of the book, is at a coffee shop. Let's say it's a Tim Hortons because it's here in Canada. And then somebody notices that the young man is sitting there all pensive, like looking, perturbed. And then so this gentleman goes up to him and says, young man, you seem confused. What's going on? And so explains the project. I went and interviewed leaders, and, they told me all kinds of things about how to motivate people, but it just doesn't feel right. There's something missing. And so the gentleman said, well, young man, what really motivates people is that you need to light a fire in their hearts. And that's how I came up with the title.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I thought, well, I think adults need the book more than the kids do right now. So so I wrote the adult version.
Right. Is there 2 versions? Is there 2 versions?
Well, you know what? I do have a manuscript for the children's book. I did end up writing it last summer, so I just haven't done anything with it yet. But yeah, so that's what this is what came out of those ideas that one morning. So
beautiful. That's so cool. That inspiration, that creativity just strikes you. That's such a cool story. I want to stay on maybe the theme of the children a bit, because I got 2 young children. I got a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, 2 girls, and I know that you've done some work around like what that leadership part is for kids and like how important that is. I'd love if you would share some stuff about that, because it's certainly something that's close to my heart. Leadership overall, for sure. I'm passionate about that just as you are, but yeah, I'd love to hear.
It's so important. And I'm sure as coaches, sometimes you think, oh, I wish I could have gotten to these people when they were 12-year-olds or something to be able to share, right? It would have
Right.
avoided a lot
Yeah.
of
Myself,
strife.
be great. Yeah.
I'm actually quite passionate about early leadership development, and I was a co-host on a show called Every Child Can Learn. And so one of my role was basically to advocate for early leadership development. And and I'm sure you've noticed this, Nick, when you talk to your kids, they kind of have an innate understanding of what leadership is. And so I have a grand niece and grandnephew. So they're 6 and 8 years old. And so what I do is I take any opportunity to ask them about leadership, because so for example, when we moved into this house last year, my grandniece, who was 5 at the time, she comes up to me, she goes, Auntie Lisa, she goes, I want to be a boss. So I said, really? Oh, well, what do bosses do? So I'm like, I'm going along with it. And she says, wow, you know, bosses tell people what to do and they do it. And she's, totally confident in this. I'm like, okay. I said, that's interesting. I said, what about leader? Like, what's that? She goes, well, leaders are nice and kind. So I said, okay, well, Ava, what if you were a leader and you were nice and kind and then people wanted to do things with you, instead of you forcing them? And she like kind of looked at me. She's like, oh, and she did a pirouette and laughed. But it's planting those seeds, right? And even in terms of mindset, so her brother Noah, he set his mind at when he was 5 years old that he wanted this big huge bunk bed, but not any bunk bed. He wanted a bunk bed, and they had to have like a queen size bed underneath in case his grandma and grandpa came over. And so he set his mind to it. So we're all like, oh, that's really cute. That's very sweet, right? Well, wouldn't you know it, Noah saved every single penny, for 2 years, anything, birthday money, any kind of money. And then he actually sold me some of his artwork. And then by the time he was 7, he bought the bunk bed of his dreams and he helped to build it. If that's not a success mindset, I don't know what is. So
Right.
children are super powerful, and I think we have a lot to learn from them in their natural, because they don't have, they don't have that programming that we have and that we have to pull away. And it's like it's so interesting to take those opportunities to engage them in conversations about leadership, and even while we read books with them, right? Why not ask them, well, what do you think about this character? Did they make a good decision? What do you think? Right? So yeah, it's really amazing what children have in them already, right?
Yeah. There's so much there that I'm so careful every day, and I obviously don't always do a good job at it, but just be not to layer on my 40 years of beliefs onto a 6-year-old.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
challenge.
yeah. It's quite a big responsibility when you think about it, when you put it that way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me want to go off and go do some parenting. But yeah, it's definitely a lot. But that's really helpful because it's just that, again, back to the awareness, right? It's just got just it's none of this stuff. I think why coaching and leadership development resonates with so many people in many different ways, of course. But I think it resonates with everyone, just whether you want to see it or not. It's because it is so innate, and it doesn't really. It requires removing things oftentimes rather than adding things.
Mm,
And so that awareness is just so powerful to be able to
mm,
just come back to, because all the things we talked about today is not about adding new skills. It's about taking things away so you can see what's there already.
I love that. And and even helping children understand that there's room for all kinds of leaders. Some will be more extroverted, more out there, and some will be quieter and more into listening, right? So it's helping them see that leadership can come in many forms. And what's important is that having integrity and that congruence, like Josh mentioned earlier, right? Being congruent, like in your heart and your mind and in your intuition, even like, do you feel whole? And that's why I was trying to explain the other day, somebody asked me, what would success mean to you? And I'm like, well, success is how I feel inside about my decisions, about how I am. And anything material that we try to acquire in order to then label success, really we're trying to take a shortcut or to how making us feel better inside, congruent, right? So if we can help people tap into that feeling, and then to help others. So that they learning how to help others feel that way, and clarity, passions, doing great work, being proud of it, connecting with your colleagues, helping others, being of service. If we can help people see success through that lens, I think we'll be much further ahead.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, Lisa, what pops in my mind is like, what better example than a kid? A kid is not sullied by all the outside perspectives, and right, you start in a pure and innocent form, and that's why it's so fun to engage with little ones, because they don't have the references that we've dirtied our souls with up until this point in life. And to Coach Dick's point, we just project onto others because it's just it's just what we've been through. It's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is it's interesting to reflect on all this. I think we've reached the point to maybe identify some takeaways. I would love for you to hold up your book again, Lisa, but I'd like to go first and then give you the last word here. Um, what dawned on me maybe a few minutes ago is, especially when you're telling that story of the difference between the boss and a leader, and how your grandniece's perspective is that leader's nice, like I want to do work with them. Uh, and this goes back to ties into the beginning of the conversation with like being mean and feeling like you have to be somebody else. I think we forget that there's a toughness sometimes to the definition of love. Love, when you think of love, you think of a grandmother, right? And somebody who might be easily taken advantage of. So that's where the hardened exterior comes from, is that we got to protect ourselves. But there's a great strength that comes alongside the softness of love. And sometimes we forget about that. And it doesn't mean we have to be mean, but it is, shows up in many different forms, boundary setting, etc. But there's a great strength that comes with that as well. And that's what I just thought about today. That's my takeaway today.
Mm, love that. Yes. And the thing is that, you know, and that's where the courage piece comes in. It's not mean to set boundaries. It's not mean to expect somebody to do their best work, right? And it's and compassion will lead to courage, because when you feel compassion for someone, which is empathy plus the desire to help, you will stop at nothing to make sure that that person feels like they belong, like you are making sure, like, for example, compassion and courage in action is a manager who stands up for their team when there's tons of work coming down the pipeline, and you're able to say, you know what, my team is burning out, so we're going to go back to the drawing board and figure out a plan so that we could do this in healthy ways. And that's why I think that the connection between courage and compassion is so important, is because compassion is not weak. Compassion is very strong. So is love. When you love, and love for humanity, love for a person, your family, your colleagues, you it's amazing what you'll do to be able to make sure that things are done right and with integrity, and that we show up as the best version of ourselves. And that means getting out of our comfort zone and standing up and giving a voice.
Hmm. Yes, from a place of strength and courage. Yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Nick, takeaway for you, aha moment, something you'd like to share?
Lots of great stuff. I think for me, goodness, there's just so much stuff to think about. It's just that my last comment was really based on a reflection. It's just taking away things. I think it's important. That's what it's about. We know intrinsically, instinctively, innately what it is and what to do, the right thing to do. And let's just not keep back to the awareness. Let's just not let the other things that are distractions that seem like the most important thing come in and get us. And just believe and just know that we've got everything we need already. Just got to keep back to that compassion. So thank you for sharing that stuff, Lisa. Great.
My pleasure. Thank you for sharing your takeaways. Yeah.
Lisa, bring us home, tie it all in a bow. Would love to see your book again. Bring us
Yeah.
home here.
Let's light a fire in their hearts. The truth about leadership. And, I think one of the biggest takeaways, in addition to what we've discussed already, is that it's possible to love your life as a leader. And a huge part of that is having that congruence. So make sure you align what's in your heart, what's in your mind, when you tap into your intuition or your gut, to bring that, to learn how to do that. And rather than think about what you should do or mimic others. So find your own leadership. lens to look through, and then help others find theirs. And I really believe that together we can make the world a better workplace, a better place for all.
Lisa Anna Palmer, thank you so much. It was a pleasure today. Thank you for joining Truth Seekers.
Oh, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be here with you, Nick and Josh.
Thank you for watching another episode of Truth Seekers. We appreciate your interaction. So please comment, like, subscribe to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want more, check out some of our links. Links to our masterclass, The Achiever's Mindset, and come join our LinkedIn group. And what do you want to see more of? Remember, we're here to share the simple secrets of successful. So help us do that. What do you want to see? What do you want to see more of? Thanks, and see you again next time.